The only real defense against fire is more fire. Medicinal fire reduces wildfire destruction by 87%. Over the last several decades, despite knowing the consequences, government bureaucrats have managed only to reduce the amount of medicinal burning in California. And the predictable results are at hand. Every year they make voluntary, non-binding pacts to burn more. But are they actually doing it? Of course not. Florida proactively burns more in 1 year than California has burned in the last 50 years. And guess which state has a wildfire problem? The natural burn rate in California is between 4 and 11 million acres every year. And because California has only been paying around 3% of its fire debt every year, in order to restore a balanced ecosystem, they have to burn 20 million acres right now. The California Air Resources Board has veto power over all firing operations because they don't want urban city dwellers to be inconvenienced by the smell of smoke. Well, kids, you're gonna get it anyway. The smoke from a firing operation is a fraction of the density of the smoke from a raging wildfire, and it doesn't have all the chemicals from all the cars and homes that get burned up. Fire is medicine. Our ancestors knew this. Just like their native forebears, hotshots love to burn. There's an art to putting black line on the map. They paint with fire, stripes to build more heat, flares and bombs to get more depth and suck the fire in on itself. Burn shows are a thing of beauty. If you burn around your community, you're immune from wildfire. Mother Nature is going to take that carbon from us whether we like it or not. And the harder we fight it, the worse it gets. Because if you don't burn it like this, Mama's going to burn it like this.
We'll do it live. Okay.
No. We'll do it live!
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live! And thing sucks!
Welcome. How you guys doing? We had to get our donkey's hooves trimmed right now, so it was a bit of a rough morning. Because guess what? He's stubborn as a mule. Today's episode is going to be interesting as the Gifford fire moves into what I call the Vladi Divac neck fuel model. Because it's just this uninterrupted Brillo patch of fuels. Vladi is going to be the theme of the day. We're going to be dunking on people today. So today there's going to be a lot of fact checking because this is something that's important. We need to hold people accountable. We need to hold government accountable. We need to hold firefighters accountable. We also need to hold mustachio documentary filmmakers accountable. So we're going to be fact checking myself today, which I'm sure some of you are really going to appreciate. Now, I wanted to play that clip, which you guys have probably seen a bunch of times, but I wanted to play the full clip. And it centers around prescribed fire in California, the realities of it, how it's not getting done, how valuable it is. This is where I get a lot of pushback. I get a ton of pushback because clearly I am a prescribed fire evangelist. And it's not just because, I have native background. I am Choctaw Indian on my mother's side. And like legit Choctaw, like we're on the Dawes rolls and everything. But I'm not necessarily biased towards, medicinal fire because of that. It's just science, it's just the reality. And it's very important to the ecosystem. But I get a lot of pushback on this. People telling me that prescribed fire, it's not this panacea, it's not going to fix things. And so we might as well just fact check me. And we're going to do that today. But we also need to fact check people like the governor of California. Now, we need to have a talk about some of this stuff because I see Spencer Pratt he's getting some stuff as per usual. This always happens where someone's kind of riding high for a while and then all of the bots and the angry, bitter people out there living in their mom's basement start sniping and biting at their heels. Now, it's no secret that I communicate with Spencer a lot ever since I did my live stream on his lawsuit against Governor Newsom and the LEDWP. He had me on his show. We talk a lot. I've never once talked politics with him. Now, we've talked about politicians, of course, because the thing is, look, politicians have an impact on fire policy and planning policy and all that's really important. And wildfires have a very direct, real impact on our lives. So unlike other, political sand table drills where it's, economic policy, which look, not to discount it, but the reality of your entire town burning down, I think is a lot more immediate and pressing. And the truth is, Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass, they actually have agency over this problem. And they really, really screwed up, like really badly. And we're gonna outline some of that. We've done it a lot, but we're gonna do more. How do we hold them accountable without it feeling like it's just political tribalism? How do we do that? Like, I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat in these positions. If they fail, we need to hold them accountable. And that's what Spencer's doing. I actually have no idea what his politics are. I couldn't tell you. Like, I talked to the dude a lot. We've never discussed it ever. I don't care who he votes for. I don't care if he voted for Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom and now he wants them gone. He just wants accountability, right? And so we need to. I've always talked about how political tribalism, it just ruins people's brains, and we need to get past this because it's just not the plane that we're on here. We're here trying to solve problems that has nothing to do with tribalism. So if you guys have a better way of holding people accountable who are in positions of power without it feeling like political sniping, I say this all the time, guys, you got to be able to criticize your guy. You have to do it. So whether Trump is your guy or Rick Caruso is your guy, obviously Rick Caruso is not in any position of power. So, how much can we talk about him? We have to talk about his political rival. Now, if you voted for Karen Bass, you have to be able to say, yeah, she screwed up, right? You cannot limit your criticism of a politician just because you either support them or you support the team that they belong to or you voted for them. It's okay to vote for somebody for whatever reason, but then when they do something that honestly disqualifies them from ever holding public office, you should be able to do that. So let's try to strike that balance today where we're going to criticize people in a way that's not politically tribal. Like I said, I have no fucking clue who Spencer voted for, and I don't care. We've never discussed it. We probably never will. It's not an issue, okay? Now, speaking of holding people accountable, there's some big wins, right? So we've got big lies, but we also have big wins. So I want to call your attention to something that we've been discussing a lot on this show, and I've been discussing a lot on Twitter. You all recall this stuff. So when the Gifford fire broke out, and we'll get to a quick update on it once we get through this. You notice how the governor was talking about this stuff? How like he's got this tick where he's just got to make this about Trump. He's got to make it about federal mismanagement of federal land, right? Gifford fire, it started on federally managed land in Los Padres National Forest. They have to do this just to play politics. Now, the irony is that it wasn't true. It started on state property and then it burned into federal property and they have to deal with it. But look at this. This was August 2nd. I want you to notice the more recent tweets. Little language shift. Look at this. Canyon fire. Thanks to an aggressive around the clock response from CAL FIRE and local and federal partners. Oh, now all of a sudden the feds are our partners? Flooding the zone with aerial assets and hand crews in close coordination with local and federal partners. All of a sudden, we're not pointing fingers at the feds. They're now our partners. I wonder why. Look at all this. Federal partners, state and federal teams. Interesting, huh? Now, I was hammering the blue-haired intern who is running this account for Governor Newsom. And I've been on this for weeks, pointing out how much his own firefighters hate him, right? I'm telling you, people in high-level positions of CAL FIRE absolutely hate Gavin Newsom. And they especially hate this finger-pointing that they were doing, where they just took every opportunity they could to do this fire on federally managed land bullshit. Well, all of a sudden, after all this criticism and us absolutely destroying them online, they've changed their tone. The thing is, you have to take victories, right? You have to learn how to accept victories. This is a victory, right? I don't want to just continuously snipe about this stuff. So I'm glad that they actually took the lesson and decided, you know what? Oh, this is a bad look. We got to stop this. Okay, this is a big victory. Now, more on the governor. let's just do a quick update of the Gifford fire since we're talking about it. On that theme of victories, I want you to look at this IR map. So this is the infrared map of the Gifford fire. They've put a ton of black line on this fire. They have done an outstanding job. It is now at 119,200 acres. If you recall, like a few live streams ago, like when this first started, when it was at like 60,000 acres, I made a post about how this could easily double, which would put it at 120,000 acres. I swear, it's like they're trying to tease me. They've got it at like 119,000. Now, chances are it's probably going to go to 120 by the time it's all over. But I do believe it is coming to a close. Let's look at the ops map if we can find that here. Now, there is a lot of black line around this thing. A lot. Look at this whole southern edge of the fire. It's like completely surrounded with black line. That is containment. That is massive. And I want to point out something here. See these H's? See all these H's on this black line up in this super, super steep, rugged wilderness down in the bald fire scar? All those H's represent hand line. That's hand crews, especially hotshot crews, hiking in there and cutting out all this fire line in this steep terrain by hand. That's miles of it. So if you ever see your local hotshots, give them a high five. Actually, more importantly, give them some tobacco or some nicotine. Give them some Zyn. You probably prefer that over hugs and Gatorades. But they're doing insanely arduous work in very hot and difficult conditions. The main problem area is up in the Garcia Wilderness, this sort of northwest corner, excuse me. They have dozer line wrapped around the areas where it's advantageous to put dozer line. We've talked about how, when the fire is up in this area, in the Vladi Divac neck fuel model, it's basically impossible to stop. And to a certain degree, they kind of just need to wait for it to get down into more favorable terrain in these grassy areas where a dozer line can do a lot of good. So that's essentially what's happening. It's really slowed down. They only had like 1,100 acres of growth in the last period in between IR flights. So it's looking good. It's looking good. We'll see if my initial prediction of 120,000 acres actually comes to fruition, but we're only a few hundred acres off. That'd be so funny if they got to like 119, 999 and they stopped it there. And then I just look like a jerk. So anyway, good news. Again, the feds are absolute studs. They are working with CAL FIRE on this. Okay. So you have a bunch of different partners on this fire. They're all doing an excellent job. And ultimately this fire is going to do a lot of good, right? We're not destroying structures. It's just getting rid of fuels. It's putting fire in a fire dependent ecosystem that desperately needs it. So let's move on to another little fact check, since that's our theme of the day. This was an interesting post by the blue-haired intern running Governor Newsom's press office account. LA's recovery is taking place at record-breaking speed, and they did this montage. It is currently the fastest major disaster cleanup in American history. Now, it's sort of kind of sounds like they're trying to take credit for it, doesn't it? I'll just point out the fact that this cleanup is being done by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. As the name might imply, this is a division of the U.S. Army. This is a federal resource, and it's a combination of both Army engineers and civilian engineers. In fact, I think it's mostly civilians, but this reports directly to the Army. Everyone with whom I've spoken about the cleanup on both the Eaton fire and the Palisades fire says that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, surprise, surprise, did an absolutely outstanding job handling this cleanup. It's important to take note of this because when the governor is tweeting about the recovery efforts here and the cleanup efforts, they are not identifying the fact that it's the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers doing the work. They're the ones doing the work, okay? Gavin Newsom is going to try to take credit for it because he always does. What I find funny about this video in particular is they really tried to cut together this Onum kind of like montage of all the construction that's going on in the Palisades. And they even show the same structures multiple times, which is just, it's so sad. Like, I wish people could just own it and just be like, hey man, we got to speed this up. This is not Like, everybody hates us. Everyone in the Palisades is pissed off and frustrated. Why can't they just own it and say, yeah, it's not coming soon enough? Instead, they have to post multiple images of the same structures to try to make it look like, oh, there's just construction everywhere. Well, is this true? I'm here to help you guys out. I was just in the Palisades doing Spencer Pratt's show, and I went ahead and I filmed as I was driving in. So let's look at this together. Let's take a look, see for yourself if this looks like a construction haven right now. Now, I tried to just let these clips play out for as long as I could, and when my view got blocked, that's when I would cut. But I'm just trying to give you guys an unedited view, and I'm not cheating the way that Governor Newsom is trying to cheat. So you can just see, hey, this is the reality. Do you see a lot of timber frames going up in this footage? What are you guys seeing here? Does it look like there's construction everywhere? What does this look like to you? I can tell you guys, I just drove through there. There are a few homes being built, but the overwhelming vast majority is just wasteland like this. Absolute wasteland. That's the thing. I'm not cutting here to rapid and repeated shots of close-ups of one little building to try to make it look like it's everywhere. I'm showing you a wide angle view, driving past the entire neighborhood so you can see for yourself. Does this look like there's construction? You can see several lots. There's one structure. There's one. They showed that one, I think, 2 or 3 times in that montage, by the way. There's a little bit of timber. There you go. There's one. Here's the thing you got to understand. These homes that are being built right now, they were already permitted before the fire. There may be one or two that have been permitted recently, but there was construction. Do you see all that stuff? Do you see how far I drove? I'm just going to keep looping this as we discuss this, just so you guys can understand. I'm not trying to pull any tricks here. I'm showing you a wide shot of the whole neighborhood, and you can see for yourself. Does it look like construction is surging in the Palisades? God, dude, I think people are so sick of just being hoodwinked all the time. Just shoot us straight. Just be honest. I said early on, it is going to take years upon years for people to get just started with their construction. And people came at me like, oh no, we're going to be rebuilt within the next 6 months. Here we are. You're not even fucking close. Like, stop pissing on me and telling me that it's raining. I'm so sick of this stuff. And all the residents in the Palisades are very, very frustrated with this. The whole permitting process is still a mess. They should be fast tracking this stuff. They're not. And all of the vegetation is already growing back in the hills. So the vegetation is coming back faster than the homes. And it's going to be like another wildfire threat before they even have half this neighborhood finished. So again, I don't know what it's going to take. Maybe I'm naive for thinking that politicians will ever shoot us straight, but this right here is the reality, okay? I've sort of built my brand on just trying to shoot it straight for you guys and shoot it right down the middle. This is what's actually happening in the Palisades. It is not happening. They have stuff set up. They're starting some building, but a lot of this was approved prior to the fires. The other thing you got to remember, a lot of people who got burned out of here, I've said this a million times. I'm going to keep saying it. There are a lot of people here. I know the perception is everybody's wealthy here. And a lot of people had all of their wealth in their home, right? So just because you own a $3 million home does not mean that you ever had $3 million to buy that home. Some people, like people in my family, they moved into the Palisades 40 years ago, back when homes weren't $3 million there. It was very, very affordable. And so as that home value matures over time, you can say, well, yeah, but I've got this paid off home. It's now worth $3 million. Therefore, you can say that your net worth is $3 million. Like, oh, I'm a multimillionaire. What happens when that home burns down? That's like if you had been storing all of your life savings in cash in your mattress and then it burned. It's all gone. So you have to understand that something like 25% of the victims of this fire, they had their fire insurance canceled right before the fire. They are screwed. Do you understand this? So a lot of people whose entire net worth was tied to their home, it is now turned to moon dust and it is gone. They're not going to get an insurance payout. They're screwed. Okay? You guys need to have more empathy for some of these victims. Just because it's a wealthy neighborhood, you guys don't understand how wealth works. Yes, there are plenty of people there. This is their fifth home. They're going to be fine. That doesn't mean that they're not entitled to justice, right? If people were at fault for this fire, they deserve it. But at the end of the day, just keep it in your hearts and your minds. There are people who had their insurance canceled and they just lost everything. And they are what we would call house poor, but on a level that you can't even fathom. And until the lawsuit gets settled and they get what they're owed, they're going to be struggling, like really struggling, and people are going to get priced out. Okay. So this isn't a joke. It's not a game. There are real people involved. And again, the liability does fall with the state. I've said this over and over and over and over again, and people will push back on this. I think it's time for me to dunk on all of you. Okay. Now, when I made my film Hot Shot, and we watched one of the better clips from that film, just so you know, this is the #1 firefighter film that's ever been made. It is the highest rated firefighter film ever made, better than Backdraft. And we did it totally grassroots, totally independently. And we had a very hard time getting distribution. Now, I finished the film in 2020. That's when I had my first cut. I had my final cut done in 2021. And it took 2 years to try to get distribution. We had meetings with HBO, Netflix, the Daily Wire, Appian Way, which is Leonardo DiCaprio's company. Now, Appian Way rejected us because we didn't make the film about climate change. We just ignored that whole thing because it doesn't matter for wildfire. It's totally irrelevant. Netflix, similarly, they did not like that it wasn't about climate change. They wanted us to recut it to make it about climate change. I refused because, again, it's not relevant for wildfire. So they gave us the cold shoulder. HBO didn't like the way that we talked about how the female firefighters have to work 3 times harder than the guys do because we live in the real world. They didn't like that. So they rejected us. And then for the Daily Wire, you would think that they would be good recipients. And I remember having a meeting with them, and I told them, guys, at first they were super interested in the film, but then it was like a little too spicy for their tastes. And I told them, pretty soon, this was back in 2023, all of Malibu is going to get nuked by a major wildfire, and it's going to be international news. And you are really going to regret not having this film in your library when everybody's talking about Malibu burning down. And then sure enough, 2025, that happens. We predicted that in the film, and I warned all of these studio executives who, I'm trying to sell the film back in 2022, 2023, and nobody cares about wildfire until it is right in their face. This is true about, obviously, film distribution companies, but it's also true about residents. And this is why we continue to have the same problems. Now, I've been trying to sound the alarm. I tried to do it with my film. Nobody cares until it's knocking on your door. Now, if I were trying to sell the film in January of 2025, of course it would sell. But people don't care when it's not in their face. And this is the core of the problem, because ultimately our only way out of this, as you saw in that clip at the beginning of this live stream, the only way out is with more fire. We need to do prescribed fire during the off seasons, and we need to do prevention. Okay? It's the only way we fix this. No amount of helicopters, no amount of frost check is ever going to get us out of this mess. How do I know this? Just so you know, when it comes to selling a film, especially a documentary, you have to get what's called E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance. That means you have to have a team of attorneys at your expense. We're talking like $10,000. You have to have this team of attorneys review every single frame and word in your film. And they need to fact check everything to make sure that you're not saying something you can get sued for. And then you get a letter from those attorneys saying, this film's been verified, give him his errors and omissions insurance. Then you spend another few $1,000s getting that insurance. So when I'm posting about stuff on Twitter, unlike all of these other people, and especially these like anonymous accounts on Twitter who seem to all be fire experts all of a sudden, they can just say whatever the fuck they want, right? Everything that I had to put in my film, which is the foundation of everything that I put on Twitter, had to be run through like 8 lawyers. And I had to pay them to fact check me. I've already gone through this process. I don't think people appreciate just how much research we did for this film. I want to show you, this is from California's own work product. Let me see if I can find what this is. This is California's Wildfire Task Force. This is from March of 2022, California's strategic plan for expanding the use of beneficial fire. As you can see, this has the state seal of the governor of California. So when I'm always telling you about how Gavin Newsom is on the hook for this stuff, a part of the reason I say that is because the governor himself knows and has produced work product talking about the need for prescribed fire. And I'm going to show you some snippets from this report to show that, like, this is not, there's no equivocating here. There's no like gray language in any of this stuff. And this work product comes directly from the governor's office. So if the governor is saying, hey, fire is inevitable, we need more prescribed fire or else everything's going to get nuked, and then he doesn't do it, and then everything gets nuked, how is he not liable? And I've asked this question for years. Why are fire victims not suing the governor? If he knows better, he promises to do 1 million acres of prescribed fire, then he doesn't do it. What do you do with that? So let's look at some of this stuff. Let's take a look at some of the key snippets in this. In this introduction, California's landscapes are among the most naturally fire dependent on Earth. Now, I always talk about, and I talked about this in my film, the language that we receive when we are doing our research and when you read the press, they will talk about California having a fire adapted ecosystem. And I never liked that because it doesn't accurately reflect the reality of California's landscape. It is a fire dependent ecosystem. The lodgepole pine, for example, the only way it can reproduce is if its pine cone burns and it releases the seeds and germinates them. So this isn't a fire adapted ecosystem. It almost makes it sound like, well, the plants have adapted to this nuisance of fire. That is not realistic. What it really is that it is a fire dependent ecosystem. So people are understating the value of fire. Going on in this introduction, again, this is from the governor himself. Their fire regimes were established by eons of geological, climatic, biological, and human influences, including both lightning and Native American cultural burning. In many California ecosystems, biodiversity, carbon stability, and overall ecological resilience are dependent on the regular occurrence of fire events. The governor himself is telling you that fire regimes are established by eons of geological, climatic, biological, and human influence. Now, if you've seen my film Hot Shot, I talk about how for 12,000 years, the original residents of this area were using fire every single year for thousands of years. That's why we have those big trees that we all love, those giant sequoias. I said this in the film. These are man-made trees. This is not natural. You do not get those trees in nature because in nature you get purging wildfires every few hundred years that would wipe all of them out. The only reason those trees exist is because humans were putting fire on the ground routinely. The more often you have fire, the smaller the fires get. And that's what allowed those trees to get so robust, okay? This study just validates everything that I've been saying and that I get criticized for. Guys, I'm not making this stuff up. Like, I'm not out here just painting my own essay. I am taking the work of legitimate fire scientists and just packaging it in a way that's, you know, like somewhat digestible. And that's all that it is. So clearly, whenever somebody's trying to tell you that these fires are unprecedented or we're dealing with some new magical kind of fire behavior that we've never dealt with before, it is a lie. We have had this forever, and we will continue to have this forever. This is a permanent part of the ecosystem, and the ecosystem is legitimately dependent upon the presence of fire. Okay, so you've heard me say this all over. Anyone who's been following me for a while, you hear me say this all the time. We have this inability to accept the inevitability of wildfire. You're gonna get it no matter what. It was in my film.
The California Air Resources Board has veto power over all firing operations because they don't want urban city dwellers to be inconvenienced by the smell of smoke. Well, kids, you're gonna get it anyway.
Is that true? As it turns out, according to the governor, the public is beginning to recognize that California can no longer eliminate fire or smoke from the landscape. Instead, our best option is to deliberately engage with fire in order to proactively decide when, where, and how it shapes our landscapes and environment. I'm just going to let that soak in for a second, because I've been saying this forever. We need to recognize both the inevitability and the necessity of fire in healthy wildland ecosystems. This is not optional. There is no world in which you do not have fire and smoke in California. So any of you people, and I include the California Air Resources Board, and any of the people who seem to think that they're doing the Lord's work by blocking fire smoke, I'm telling you, the Eaton fire is the result of community members and politicians not wanting smoke around Altadena and Pasadena. For that reason, the U.S. Forest Service did not get a chance to burn Eaton Canyon, which they had been trying to do for years. This avoidance of smoke puts us in this inevitable situation where you are going to get devastating wildfires no matter what. People, you're never getting around this, okay? You have to accept that there's going to be smoke and fire. So the best thing you can do is do it on your terms.
Mother Nature is going to take that carbon from us whether we like it or not. And the harder we fight it, the worse it gets. Because if you don't burn it like this, Mama's going to burn it like this.
And that's exactly what we saw. This is exactly what we saw. If you don't burn it on your terms, the way that Mother Nature decides, it's going to be on those days when you have fire weather. It's going to be on those days when you have downslope winds coming in at 70 miles an hour with zero humidity, and you're going to get the worst outcomes possible. Okay, this is why we need to take advantage of these opportunities that we get in these off-season years, like the heavy rain years, like 2022, 2023, and even 2024. You need to be doing a lot of burning. How much burning do you have to do? Well, let's check in with my film.
The natural burn rate in California is between 4 and 11 million acres every year. And because California has only been paying around 3% of its fire debt every year, in order to restore a balanced ecosystem, they have to burn 20 million acres right now. The natural burn rate in California is...
Now, some people will balk at this. They don't believe me when I say that the natural burn rate in California is 4 and 11 million acres every single year. When we had 4.5 million acres burn in 2020, it was considered the worst fire catastrophe in the history of the state. And I looked at that and said, yeah, that's what we need. That's a good start. Now, all of the homes that got wrecked along the way, that's not good. But this is what the ecosystem needs. And you catch the tail end of that where I said that in order to restore a balanced ecosystem, we need to burn 20 million acres right now. People do not believe that. They think I'm just a lunatic. From the governor, one study suggests that prior to 1800, approximately 4.5 million acres of the state burned annually. Do you guys understand? I am not making this stuff up. I'm not just throwing random numbers out there. Prior to 1800, approximately 4.5 million acres of the state burned annually. Native Americans were likely responsible for a significant portion of this acreage. They burned and continue to burn for a variety of reasons, including to recycle nutrients, manage plant and wildlife habitat, provide community protection, control insects and disease, and engage in cultural and spiritual practices. With colonization, many of these practices were significantly reduced or eliminated, fundamentally altering fire scope and intensity across the state. Could it be any more clear? In 1996, the Department of the Interior and the U.S. Geological Survey, through the Centers for Water and Wildland Resources at the University of California, Davis, released the status of the Sierra Nevada Ecosystem Project report, in which an independent panel of scientists called for a reestablishment of the historic fire regime in the Sierra Nevada. Since that time, fire scientists and ecologists have continued to observe the negative consequences of fire exclusion. This is why I'm always telling you that fire suppression makes for bigger fires and it destroys the ecosystem. What drives me so crazy is that as we're doing this, as we are depriving the forest of what it needs, and it is dying and you're getting this overgrowth, What ends up happening is you have all this resource competition where you have 20 million trees instead of a million trees. And so now they're all competing over the same amount of resources. So they're all water deprived. And because of that, they become more susceptible to invasive species like the bark beetle. What gets me so frustrated is the Washington Post, the LA Times, the New York Times, they deliberately ignore this reality. And they will just say, oh, it's like this plague of locusts just came in, like the bark beetle just came in and destroyed the forest because of climate change. And they always do this. The bark beetles are always there. The way that trees defend themselves from these bark beetles every single year is they have this viscous sap. So when a bark beetle is coring through the tree, the sap comes out, it seals the wound, and it will, trap the bugs and kill them, right? Sort of like Jurassic Park. You remember the mosquito in the amber? When trees are dehydrated, they do not have that viscous sap, right? So they don't have their defense. Because of that, now the coring beetles can get it. It's just like your immune system, right? You're exposed to the cold virus all the time. It's not just in the wintertime. The issue is during the winter, you're not getting enough vitamin D, so your immune system is weaker. And then the cold virus gets the upper hand. That's exactly what happens here. So in the absence of wildfire or prescribed fire, you have too many trees competing over too little rain. It's really that simple. Become susceptible to invasive species. And then once you have beetles coring through these trees, it now becomes like the most explosive powder keg of fire fuel you could ever imagine. Now, what about that need to do 20 million acres right now? Where did I get that number from? Again, this came out after I finished my film, by the way. As a result, current estimates indicate that between 10 and 30 million acres in California would benefit from some form of fuel reduction treatment. Fire activity at low to moderate severity is particularly needed, though higher severity patches can have ecologically beneficial outcomes as well. What is between 10 and 30 million acres? 20 million. This is what I mean when I try to shoot it down the middle. I mean it literally. I know all this stuff from all the studies that I've read. And so when I made my film, I'm like, you know what? I could go for the sensational answer and say 30 million acres need to be burned right now. I'm going to split the difference. Between 10 and 30 is 20 million acres. I am not making this stuff up. And you'll notice that they say that fire activity at low to moderate severity is particularly needed. Not thinning, not pile burning, not mulching, none of this bullshit, not goats. All of this stuff that you guys throw at me is like, it's like you guys want to do everything but prescribed fire. And I do not understand what this obsession is with trying to reject the plain reality. I'm not being some kind of tribalist here. I'm just reading what the fire scientists are saying. Could it get any more plain? All of the smart nerds who understand this stuff are telling you fire is the most needed tool. And yet it is the most unused tool in the toolkit. And we're going to show you that.
The smoke from a firing operation is a fraction of the density of the smoke from a raging wildfire, and it doesn't have all the chemicals from all the cars and homes that get burned up. Fire is medicine. Our ancestors knew this.
Fire is medicine. You guys got to understand that the way that we view fire, it's like it's this menace. And it's understandable if you live in the Palisades or Paradise, California, or Altadena. Because for you, when fire moved through your neighborhood, it was a menace. The thing is, it does not have to be like that. And it doesn't change the fundamental reality that fire for the natural landscape is medicine, and it is necessary. California is blessed with the most beautiful forests in the country. And we're not giving it what it needs. We're depriving it of what it needs. Fire is medicine. I want to point out this other quote. This is again from the governor's report on the need for prescribed fire in California, right? So this is the governor's own work product. And all it is saying over and over how, hey, we need a lot of fire. Hey, we need like 20 million acres of prescribed fire. Pyrodiversity promotes biodiversity. In 1991, Robert E. Martin and David B. Sapsis published Fire as Agents of Biodiversity. Pyrodiversity promotes biodiversity. This key paper argued that fire suppression led to a reduction in, quote, pyrodiversity, or variation in the frequency and severity of burns across an ecosystem. In turn, they argued that the reduction in pyrodiversity negatively impacted biodiversity as the landscape became more homogeneous. Ultimately, the paper instigated a larger conversation about beneficial fire in California and what it means to live in a strongly fire-associated landscape. I want to pause on this for a second. Again, there's a lot of pushback from environmental NGOs in California where they will legitimately sue to stop prescribed burns because they think pushing fire through the landscape, they don't understand it. I don't know if it was because of Bambi or what, or Smokey the Bear, where we think of fire only as a menace. We don't understand the medicinal benefits of it and how it's basically nature's cleaning crew, okay? Look, it's not a panacea, but it kind of is. It really is the missing ingredient when it comes to California. I'm going to say this till I'm blue in the face because guess what? The science backs me up. I'm not making this stuff up. I didn't just pull these numbers out of my ass. So you will see like the Friends of the Spotted Owl, they will sue to stop prescribed burn plans. Like the worst example of this was on the Calder Fire. And that was 2021. Calder Fire burned through Grizzly Flats. Grizzly Flats had a burn plan that was stalled for a decade. The Forest Service wanted to do this burn around Grizzly Flats, and it got stalled out because environmental NGOs were suing the shit out of them. And so it never happened. And then, of course, that inevitable conflagration came through, burned down all of Grizzly Flats. Now, the Calder Fire continued to push towards South Lake Tahoe, an area where, big surprise, the prescribed fire actually gets done because it's a very wealthy community. Grizzly Flats is a rural community, so fuck them, right? It hits the prescribed fire area in South Lake Tahoe and then stops. And of course, all of those super expensive rental properties in South Lake Tahoe are totally fine. You guys seeing how this works now? Continuing on with the governor's work product. More recent studies support these conclusions. Okay, we're not just relying on 1991 studies. This is just a plain truism about pyrociviculture. More recent studies support these conclusions, finding ecological and wildfire resilience benefits in heterogeneity in vegetation patterns. Where fire is appropriately restored to an ecosystem, it creates fine-scale variability in forest structure, which may then interrupt fuel continuity and prevent future fires from killing overstory trees. Remember what I said in my film about how those giant sequoias are man-made trees? This is exactly what I'm talking about. It creates fine-scale variability in forest structure, which may then interrupt fuel continuity and prevent future fires from killing overstory trees. That's what keeps the fire from getting to the crown, right? Get rid of the ground fuels, and then those big, General Sherman trees that we all love, they get to survive. Now, they deploy prescribed fire in these forests very well. This is how they protect those trees. But they didn't do enough of that in big basin redwoods, and a ton of those trees got nuked. As a result, lower severity fire or scattered patches of higher severity fire reduce the risk of conversion to other vegetation types. There are a lot of people who get this wrong. They will constantly say how fire is creating fuel conversion to these invasive species. The reality is the opposite. Again, this is the governor himself who's publishing this stuff. This is Gavin Newsom's publishing, talking about how the way that we protect our ecosystems is with fire. Look at this conclusion. Ultimately, a fire must play a preeminent role in delivering and maintaining biodiversity and resilience in California. This isn't even talking about, protecting our communities from wildfire. This is just for the health of the forest, right? So all of these look, I am a bleeding heart environmentalist, but I understand how fire is beneficial for the landscape. A lot of people who, look, their heart's in the right place. So God bless them. I'm not trying to criticize being a bleeding heart environmentalist, but you guys are distracted with climate stuff and you think that fire is a menace, but what you're doing is you're depriving the forest of what it really needs. So you guys really have to study up on this stuff. Ultimately, fire must play a preeminent role. We all speak English, right? Preeminent role. Fire needs to be the main event Okay. It can't be like, oh, well, with all our fuel mitigation work, we'll just do a bunch of chipping and we'll do goats and we'll do some mowing and stuff. Look, all that's great, but fire needs to be the main event. I keep saying this over and over and over again. The question is, if the governor knows that fire needs to be the main event and needs to play a preeminent role in delivering and maintaining biodiversity and resilience in California, is it the main event? The answer may surprise you, or will it? Here's the RX fire numbers. Now, the governor made a pledge to do, back in 2020, he made a pledge to do 1 million acres per year. And as we talked about earlier, how much do we need to do? 4.5 million acres. That is the baseline. Okay. So his pledge of doing 1 million acres a year is a quarter of what's needed. A quarter. And in order to catch up with our fire debt, we need how much? Between 10 and 30 million acres. So what we're doing right now by saying we're going to do 1 million a year, we are just tickling the surface. How much are they actually doing? Here's the numbers. Now you'll notice the U.S. Forest Service does way more than the state. Interesting, right? Gavin's always bitching about the feds, yet they're the ones doing the most burning. You can see the blue hashed bars here. That's the U.S. Forest Service. The green is CAL FIRE. Now, CAL FIRE has stepped it up a little bit, but I'm not a math surgeon. To my eye, this looks like they're doing about 80,000 acres, right? So as the feds do less and less, CAL FIRE is doing a little bit more, and it seems like the equilibrium point is 80,000 acres, and that's it. And keep in mind that they double, triple, quadruple count their acreage. Okay, so even these numbers can't be trusted, but let's just take it at face value. 80,000 acres a year when we need to be doing 1 million? Not doing it. We are not cutting it. Now, there is some nuance. Right? This is not to say that prescribed fire or fire managed for resource benefit, that's where, if a wildfire happens to start and it starts in a location where not anything is truly threatened, they'll just kind of let it do its thing. That's called managing a fire. And they'll say managing a fire for resource benefit. So this is not to say that those fires are an appropriate management tool for all of California. Now, I said this in the film as well, right? California is a very diverse ecosystem, and you have different burn regimes. So in Southern California, in Santa Clarita Valley, it's a xeric region. It's very dry, desert vegetation. It's much different from the more dewy, big basin redwoods, Boulder Creek area up in Northern California along the coast, where you have completely different coastal influence. The fire regime up there is like 1 in every 300 years. Santa Clarita, it's like every 8 years. Okay, so it's way different. So, we speak generally about California, but you have to take a scalpel. So different places are going to need different things. Studies have found that much of Southern California is experiencing too much fire as a result of increased ignition risk, population pressures, and climatic influences. Okay, this fixation on climate, they have to throw it in there because it's like, oh man, we've just had like 90 pages of talking about how we need prescribed fire. We got to slip in the climate change thing. Like that matters. Do I have to point out to you guys that like California has seen 200-year droughts? You realize that, right? Okay, so drought is not new to California. So to continue to harp on the climate stuff, it's like, yeah, things are getting warmer and drier, right? These things oscillate. We also just had like massive rain years too in 22, 23, even 24, right? 24 had tons of rain. 2019 had tons of rain. So this idea like that's the control knob for wildfires, it's so absurd. And the thing is, what are you going to do about the climatic influences? What are you going to do about the climate? You're not going to do anything about it. Okay, so even if you believe that by buying Teslas, you're going to make the weather less angry, give me a break, guys. Like, we got to remove this tick about talking about climate change every time we talk about wildfire because it is a distraction, right? Clearly, the only things that we can control are removing fuels where they need to be gone and using prescribed fire. But when we look at how they're saying how Southern California is experiencing too much fire as a result of increased ignition risk, population pressures, I will get this thrown at me quite a bit. when I say how we need more prescribed fire, they'll say, well, some areas are seeing too much fire. Like, why do you think that is? The same principles need to apply, right? The same principles that I'm always talking about, like, dude, get rid of all the vegetation along the roadways. There should be zero vegetation next to the 5 freeway or the 14 freeway, right? This is where you see a lot of ignitions occur. That's why you are getting fire in that landscape. It's not from lightning strikes, okay? There's also recreational problems. You'll have guys on dirt bikes and they'll, go off the OHV trail and, like take a piss or something. Meanwhile, their tailpipe is touching some tall grass that's not being maintained properly. And then that starts a fire, right? Sometimes shit happens, right? Like the canyon fire started right behind a shooting range. What do we think happened there? Okay, so you guys need to mitigate some of that stuff. And the way that you mitigate some of that stuff is you do prescribed fire around the stuff where you have common ignition sources. You get rid of the vegetation around your firing range, right? You have Caltrans get rid of all the vegetation along the roadway, which clearly they didn't do for the Gifford fire, because that's what started the Gifford fire, was Caltrans did not clear enough vegetation from the roadway. Okay, so if you want to reduce the amount of fire, the unscheduled fire, the unscheduled brush clearance, then you have to still do all of these things I'm talking about. You have to do prescribed fire in the areas where it makes sense, and that is around the stuff that we don't want burning, okay? So this idea that somehow, oh, well, these areas in SoCal are seeing too much fire, that's the problem. Come on, guys. That is not an argument. Continuing on with this, again, this is Governor Newsom's own work product here. In areas where fire has been excluded for too long, however, the current pace of restoration is far below levels needed to restore landscape resilience. Between 2017 and 2020, CAL FIRE and the U.S. Forest Service completed or assisted with prescribed fire activities on approximately 80,000 acres annually. So my math was right. That was that graph that we just looked at, right? Where between the two agencies, where Forest Service seems to be just going down. And again, this is like during the tenure of that horrendous Randy Moore. Just awful. The worst director of the U.S. Forest Service, I think, in history. You cannot let a soil scientist run the U.S. Forest Service. You need someone like Bobby Garcia, who understands that it is a wildfire agency. And the thing that is the biggest threat to the health of our forests is, of course, the lack of fire and the management of wildfires. So you need an actual operator who understands this. Us having Randy Moore as the head of the U.S. Forest Service was an absolute catastrophe. The dude banned prescribed fire nationally. Can you believe that? Here we are reading about how fire is the most important thing that the forest needs, and he banned it. Unbelievable. Never let a soil scientist run your Forest Service. Sorry if you're a soil scientist, but you can't be in charge of this stuff. You need to let operators be in charge of this. So between 2017 and 2020, CAL FIRE and the U.S. Forest Service completed about 80,000 acres annually. In the same period, tribes, California state parks, the NPS, local agencies, and private entities completed burns on tens of thousands of additional acres annually. The U.S. Forest Service and National Park Service also completed approximately 20,000 acres annually of fire managed for resource benefits. We remember what that is. Numerous studies and assessments have identified barriers to expanding beneficial fire activities, including insufficient human and other resources, regulatory hurdles, and lack of public buy-in. This is a big one, and this is why Altadena burned. They, in the Angeles National Forest, could not get public buy-in to do prescribed fire in Eaton Canyon. And as a result of that, you get the Eaton fire. It's really that simple, folks. So you need to get buy-in. Like all of you civilians who are watching this, people in these communities, you need to get behind this. You need to push it. Okay? If it's not getting done, you guys are at risk. And it's really that simple. So whatever the mental hurdle, that roadblock in our brains that tells us fire bad, that Tarzan mindset, we need to invert it. Fire good, fire necessary. You have to do it. Let Altadena be a cautionary tale for all of you guys. The climatic conditions that created that windstorm, which is very common in California, it's not going anywhere, right? We have a name for these winds for a reason, right? They've been here forever. Santa Ana winds in Southern California, Diablo winds in Northern California, Santa Lucia winds in Central California, the Sundowner winds along Santa Barbara. They're not going anywhere. I've always had them. We're always going to have them. Okay? So stop worrying about the weather component. You're always going to get it. You guys need fire. You need this stuff. This isn't just me talking. This is the governor himself. What drives me crazy is that he knows all this stuff, and yet he's not doing it. Now here, they're bragging about doing 80,000 acres annually. But what we know about the governor is that he lies about this stuff. Newsom misled the public about wildfire prevention efforts ahead of the worst fire season on record. Newsom has claimed that 35 priority projects carried out as a result of his executive order resulted in fire prevention work on 90,000 acres. But the state's own data show the actual number is 11,399. Dude, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, the governor can clearly make it up. He's claiming 90,000 acres, which again is a fraction of what's needed. It's a fraction of what he committed to doing, which is 1 million acres. And yet the actual number is 11,399. Do you guys understand where like all of my frustration comes from? This isn't a political thing. It's just we're being lied to constantly, and it never stops. The data show that CAL FIRE treated 64,000 acres in 2019, but only 32,000 acres in 2020, and 24,000 acres through Memorial Day of this year. The federal government and private landowners also chip in, but the totals remain far below what experts say is required to effectively adapt to the dangers of climate change. See how they do that? You see how they do this little curveball with the fucking climate change thing? Guys, how is it in one breath you're talking about how fire has been medicine for eons, how your entire ecosystem is dependent upon having 4.5 million acres of fire on the ground every single year, and yet all of this is now about climate change? This has nothing to do with climate change. That 4.5 million acre number came from, remember the year? Do we remember the year? 1800. Prior to 1800, we were putting 4.5 million acres on the ground. 4.5 million acres of fire on the ground prior to 1800. When did the climate change start? Right? They always point out the hockey stick graph. Was that before or after 1800? Was it before or after we were putting 4.5 million acres of fire on the ground every year in California? Every year. This has nothing to do with climate change. Like, guys, you want to do the climate stuff, do the climate stuff. If you think this is a huge catastrophe, please, by all means, do it. Just leave it out of the fucking wildfire debate. This is a fire-dependent ecosystem. And for millennia, we have needed 4.5 million acres of fire on the ground every single year in California. It has nothing to do with changes in climate. God, you guys really have to get over this shit. It's just a distraction, right? If you continue putting it on climate change, then people are not going to accept what even the governor is complaining about, that people cannot accept the inevitability of wildfire. Why do you think that is? It's because you're blaming it on climate change. And so now people are putting up solar panels and buying Teslas instead of going, shit, we really need to put fire on the ground. If it is inevitable and the only solution is fire and the forest needs fire or else it's going to die, we got to stop wasting our fucking time and money on all this other climate stuff, and we need to do this right now. But if you continue to say that due to climate change, they're going to think, well, maybe the fire isn't inevitable. Maybe it's just a result of climate change. So if we make the weather less angry, well, then we don't have to put that fire in the ground. It's a fucking lie. You have to put the fire in the ground. Guys, get over it. This is why I keep harping on this stuff. This isn't about being a climate denier. You guys are the fucking science deniers. How many scientists do I got to show you? How many studies do I have to show you for you to understand? From the governor's own mouth, this has nothing to do with climate. Stop making it about fucking climate change. You guys are just like, you're just going to keep watching all of your Teslas and your solar panels burn up in a massive fire. Now the question becomes, are they actually doing this work? This was from 2024, where the Forest Service actually stepped up some of their prescribed fire. But how much did they do? What was their record-setting year for prescribed fire in a state that requires 4 million? They did 72,000 acres. 72,000 acres was a record. That's a record. Florida burns 2 million acres every year. And yet the record high for California is 72,000. Do you guys understand how dire this is? This is why I sound like a fucking maniac all the time. Because it's like, I feel like, am I taking crazy pills? Am I the only one? Like, again, I'm not very smart. I'm not good with numbers. I'm pretty sure that 72,000 is not a significant chunk out of 4.5 million, let alone the 1 million, which is just a quarter of what we need. But that is what Gavin Newsom pledged to do. And we're doing 72,000 acres. And that is a record. That is a record, meaning that's as good as it gets, guys. They did an interagency tracking system. So there's this dashboard where you can track the fuels reduction work that's being done in the state. And now I've talked about this all the time. When you ask the governor, how much prescribed fire are you doing? He said, well, we've treated 700,000 acres. And again, they say the word treated because treatment includes multiple processes that aren't prescribed fire. And it also includes prescribed fire. So they can conflate all of that stuff and make you believe that they're doing what they say in their own words is necessary for forest resilience and fire protection. So they created this dashboard where they're going to show you all of these acres they're doing. And look, oh my God, all these agencies, they did 1 million acres. They fulfilled their goal. Well, let's look into it. Let's look into what they actually did. Now, they have different ways of collating this data. So if you look up here at the top, this is sorted by activity. Activity is not an area measurement. Activity is not an area measurement. Yet they're trying to say, we've got acres, activity acres. Do you understand what's happening here? If they do multiple processes on the same acreage, they then count that acreage multiple times. So they get to claim that they did 1 million activity acres. When you click on footprints, you can see just the actual footprint, the actual area measurement of what they did. Footprint acres. Oh, all of a sudden it's a lot less. And even with this, let's look at what did they actually do? What did they actually do? Let's look at the activities. Mechanical fuels reduction, 565,000 acres. So more than half of this total is not prescribed fire. How much prescribed fire did they do? They're claiming 260,000 acres. But wait a second. I thought the record was 72,000. How is this possible? They lie all the time. Now, even in this interagency tracking, let's take a look at, let's see if we can look at around the Palisades, right? Since this is in the news, and we've talked about how the Palisades are surrounded by Topanga State Park. Did they do any work in Topanga State Park? Did California, let's look at California state parks. They did 14,582 activity acres. What did they do? Let's look here. What did they actually do? Oh, they've got some parcels around here. It's around Topanga. Let me see if I can zoom this. There we go. There we go. What did they actually do here? Let's see anything around the Palisades. Oh, there. Look, okay, you can see this purple outline. This shows what the California State Parks actually did for fuel reduction. What does that look like to you? What does it look like they actually did? To me, it looks like they took a fucking lawnmower up a hiking trail, and that's it. Notice how all of their activity is right along the trail. So literally all they did was trim back some of the vegetation that was encroaching on this tiny hiking trail on their fire road. That's all that they did. Mowing. Do you see this? This is the activity. They took a fucking lawnmower to a fire road. That is the extent of the work that was done in Topanga State Park. And just this one parcel, what was this? 1.3 acres of ecosystem or habitat restoration. This is what I mean when they say treated. It includes multiple processes that aren't prescribed fire, and one of those is habitat restoration. That is the extent of what was done in the last recorded calendar year for Topanga State Park. Look how big Topanga State Park is. Look how it completely surrounds the Palisades. They did only mowing along their own trails. That's it. That's it. None of that is offering protection for the Palisades. Notice how where it counts along this perimeter, along this edge that interfaces with the neighborhood, nothing got done. Here's one tiny strip on Via Floresta. That's it. The rest, all of these fingers here, didn't get touched. No activity done whatsoever. It is fucking embarrassing. Again, they will mow around their trail. Here's mechanical thinning at Will Rogers State Park. So they did a nice loop around their own park, but nothing around the alphabet streets. Nothing around Spencer Pratt's home. Nothing. Not a single thing. Maybe they did it in previous years. Let's look at 2022. Nope. 2021? Nope. No, dude, nothing. You can't be serious. They did nothing. There's some. In 2022, what did they do? Let's click on it. Ecosystem or habitat restoration. This is what I mean, guys. The governor himself produces this document that we've been reading from, that it's uniform in its praise and for the necessity of wildland fire, right? Prescribed fire. And it's not just about getting rid of fuels. This is why you cannot get fooled into thinking that mechanical thinning can replace the benefit of prescribed fire. It can't, right? You can have an impact in terms of immediate fire protection around a structure, but it does not provide any real resource benefit on the level of prescribed fire, right? This is a unique thing that cannot be replaced. It's just like exercise. You know what I mean? Like you can take Ozempic and yeah, you're going to lose weight. That's going to help you with diabetes and cardiovascular issues. It does not replace exercise, right? Yeah, exercise and Ozempic are two ways of getting leaner. But does Ozempic provide any health benefits directly the way that exercise does? Of course not. And it's much the same with mechanical thinning and prescribed fire. The other thing that you have to understand is that prescribed fire is so much cheaper to do. And it is incredibly expensive. California is the most expensive place to do both fire suppression and prescribed fire. And prescribed fire can cost about, the range is like $500 to $1,000 per acre, which is ridiculously expensive. But all that would have been required to protect the Palisades would have been about $500,000. That's all you would have needed. Okay? Compare that with the multi-billion-dollar price tag of losing the entire neighborhood. Not to mention the intangible cost of the loss of human life. And we're going to trade that because we didn't want to spend $500,000 on a firing operation. Compare this to mechanical thinning and other fuel reduction method, which typically costs between $1,500 and $4,000 per acre. But when you look at the dashboard, when you look at what they're actually doing, they are primarily doing targeted grazing, mechanical hand fuels reduction, targeted grazing, California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, mechanical and hand fuels reduction, U.S. Forest Service. Again, the lion's share of the work is mechanical and hand fuels reduction. The most expensive treatment model and the least amount of resource benefit. And they're subjugate. Look, they're counting tree planting. They are counting in fuels reduction. They're counting adding more fuels to the landscape. My God, dude. Again, CAL FIRE, the lion's share, more than double anything else that they do. More than everything else combined, they're doing the most expensive, the least resource benefit, when they could be doing prescribed fire. They're not doing it. And then you'll notice that the agency that's doing the most, private timber companies. Private timber companies are taking care of their forests because they have to, because they actually care about the value of their product. But even with that, dude, they're counting like what they do for work. They're also counting tree planting. So they counted 40,000 acres of tree planting. Adding more fuels to the landscape is now considered fuel reduction. You got to be fucking kidding me. Timber harvest, meaning what they do for a job, cutting down trees. These are timber companies counting timber harvest as fuel reduction. God, dude, it's a side effect of the industry itself. You got to be fucking kidding me. Let's look at 2023. Again, the overwhelming majority of what's getting done is just mechanical thinning. Mechanical. It's only the Forest Service that stepped up prescribed fire. But they lie about this stuff because they double count acres all the time. God, it's so frustrating. So you guys can look this stuff up for yourself. But I've said it over and over and over and over again. Guys, fire is inevitable. We have this inability to accept the inevitability of wildfire. And according to the governor himself, Governor Hairgel himself, they're telling us that wildfire is the most important thing to do for the resilience of our forests. And we need to be doing 4.5 million acres. That is what this state is accustomed to having. And in order to catch up, because we haven't been doing this, we need to do between 10 and 30 million acres. I said this all in the film. Around here, Casey's saying, around here, Caltrans mechanical fuels reduction is mowing the dry grass in their right-of-way. That is 100% correct. So when Caltrans is doing fuels reduction, what they're doing is they're driving along the side of the roadway, and they've got that big mower that has that arm that they can pull up and down, and they just do a quick graze like that. That is not enough to prevent fires. Obviously, the Gifford fire started in an area where they had mowed, but there's still grass, right? When you mow the grass, you're just cutting those dry stalks and it's just dumping into the ground. It's, kind of mulching it up, but it's still flammable. And so you can easily see a spark carry from the roadway into the Los Padres National Forest, which is what happened with the Gifford fire. Okay. So what you need, and the goal of like what hotshots do, is bare mineral soil. When they are scratching handline, their goal is to get bare mineral soil. That's something that can't burn. So if you are just mowing along the side of the roadway, that is not enough. It is not enough. You have to get rid of it. There's no reason to have anything but bare mineral soil on the side of all roadways in California. There's no excuse for anything else. Guys, I'm not pulling these numbers out of my ass. And even the governor himself, in his own work product, is telling us how much we need this stuff, how inevitable these fires are. The landscapes in California are among the most naturally fire dependent on Earth. It is not fire adapted. It is fire dependent. The overall ecological resilience. So this isn't just about protecting our communities. It's about protecting the forests. They are dependent on the regular occurrence of fire events. Science strongly points to the need to reestablish more frequent fire across a significant part of the state. Reestablishing fire regimes will not only restore ecosystem resilience, but will be critical to reducing the extreme costs of catastrophic wildfire, direct loss of life and property, significant resource damage, and an increasing public health threat from wildfire smoke. We played that clip earlier. What would you rather be breathing? Some burning trees or a burning Tesla, right? We have big problems. We have Superfund sites in Altadena and the Palisades because of all the beryllium and mercury and lead poisoning from all of that green stuff that burned up. Guys, you got to stop worrying about the smoke. It's inevitable. It's coming whether you like it or not. But you get to choose. Is it just going to be some delicious cedar trees burning? Or is it going to be toxic chemicals burning? The public must recognize that California can no longer eliminate fire or smoke from the landscape. It is inevitable. This was like the main thesis of my film. Brian Scott Olds is saying, we had goats doing the work to clear brush every summer on Asilomar above Tahitian Terrace until the state banned it. You got to be kidding me. So here they are. They're actually putting goats to work to try to get rid of some of these fuels and maintain it. Because look, I get it. It's hard and it can be expensive to go up there and like clear out this vegetation. That's why I'm always talking about how you need to do fire. It's way cheaper than mechanical thinning. But then, goats can maintain it because it is going to grow back. You got to do it multiple times a year. And then they banned it. Then Casey says, and the state changed the independent contractor rules, which drove a lot of the goat operations out of business. Oh my God. This is Kafka-esque. Like what's happening in California, it's truly Kafka-esque. It's hard to watch this, honestly. Now, the way that I made my film, it kind of demonstrates this fatigue that I have, where I understand how we have this hubris where we think we can just stop this. We can stop this inevitable force of nature. And the intro to my film, it may be a little cryptic or not obvious. That the obvious way that you start a wildfire film is you bombard the audience with all the cell phone footage of the people trying to get out of there, and you just try to beat the shit out of your audience and scare them, and you show them burning up animals, and you just try to shock them right out of the gates. I took the opposite take, and this is the intro to our film. I'm going to just talk over it. And what it was, it's a montage of my signature shot where I would go to the middle of the freeway, because anybody who grew up in California knows that like there's no force more powerful in California than the California freeway. The idea that you could ever see an empty freeway in California is staggering, right? It's like straight out of a Terry Gilliam film. And so I thought the juxtaposition of seeing these colossal monuments to human achievement, right? This is like maybe the greatest accomplishment of man's authority over nature, to be able to carve these massive roads through the wildlands, through this rugged terrain, where, on the 5 freeway in Santa Clarita, you have 18 lanes of traffic cut through what used to be this like harsh desert landscape. And I was trying to make a statement about the hubris of man, how you could have this massive infrastructure, the greatest accomplishment of us conquering nature, completely shut down by one tiny little spark, as a reminder that we do not have dominion over this natural process. It has dominion over us, right? That's what this montage was all about. And you'll notice that I ended the montage with a somewhat cryptic, but to me, it's very obvious, warning that Malibu was next. And if you've seen any of my news appearances, my podcast appearances, I'm always talking about Malibu as Fire Alley. And I wonder if you guys noticed it. At the end of this montage, I warned about what? What did I warn you guys about? Where does this montage end? The Pacific Coast. This was footage from the Woolsey fire, the last time Malibu burned, before the Palisades fire. I was trying to sound the alarm that this hubristic mindset that we have, where we're going to stop this natural process, it's going to stop us. It is going to conquer everything that we have. And I have a chapter in the film called From the Sierras to the Sea. This fire is going to push us from the Sierras all the way out to the ocean, where we are going to have to literally flee to the ocean to get away from this. You cannot get rid of this, okay? You cannot just like plug your ears and say, la, la, la. Fire is going nowhere. From the Sierras to the sea, it is coming all the way to the coast. You cannot run from it. This was the whole point of this montage. And it is so maddening and sad for me to try to broadcast this and nobody listens. And then to watch the Pacific Palisades get wrecked and to watch the Pacific coast get hit yet again by the exact fire that I was warning about, in the exact fucking spot that I tried to warn you guys about. When are we going to understand? Fire is our neighbor. It is never moving out. It is like a squatter in Los Angeles County. You are never getting rid of them. You're never getting rid of it. Okay? We need to start doing what the governor says that we need to do. Again, you think I'm always shitting on the governor. I give him credit for publishing this document that talks about the need for prescribed fire. We need to accept it's not going anywhere. It is inevitable. What's it going to take, man? Because of the fire industrial complex, says KCK, can't stop the money train. Man, oh man, I had that scene in my flick about the wildfire industrial complex. Unfortunately, the Palisades right now is a gold rush. We've talked about this. There are a lot of out-of-state contractors who've come in from places like Texas with RVs. They are planning on camping out in California for the next 2 to 3 years, where they've been building in Texas for $150 a square foot. Now in the Palisades, you know how much they're building for? $850 a square foot. It is a gold rush, and there are thousands of structures that need to be rebuilt. So a lot of contractors are fleeing their states to come out and get in on that sweet, sweet rebuilding money. All the vehicles that need to be repurchased, all of the furniture that needs to get repurchased, all the sales tax that's going to be generated on stuff that's just getting repurchased, right? So think of all the possessions that everybody lost, like the practical things, like cooking equipment, couches, and televisions. They already paid sales tax on all that stuff. They're going to have to rebuy all of that and pay more sales tax on all of that stuff. It's a cash cow for too many people, right? This is what we call a perverse incentive. So it's not to say that the fires are deliberately set so people can make money. It's just that so many people are going to make money off of this tragedy that unfortunately the only people who are hard up are the victims. And for some people who have really good insurance, they'll be made whole, but a lot of people don't have insurance. And even with the insurance, it can't buy back like those, precious like childhood photos and, unique art, stuff like that. You're never getting it back. But so many other people are going to make so much money off of this stuff. Like think about the people who manufacture the helicopters that Gavin Newsom keeps buying brand new. What about them? What about the people who manufacture the fire retardant that they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on every single year? Are they pissed? Are they pissed about like making all this money? The people who make Phos-Chek, Perimeter Solutions, their stock just hit a record high. They're not pissed about this stuff. Business is booming in the wildfire industry and all of the ancillary industries. Home Depot is going to make a ton of money just on some of the building materials. Like what other industries are making tons of money off of this stuff? When I went to the Palisades, and this was 6 months after the tragedy, there were 3 documentary crews out there. I can't even imagine how many documentary crews have already vultured their way in through the Palisades. You know how many documentaries are going to be made because of this? How many news segments have been made? The media makes a ton of money off of this coverage. Too many people are getting their beaks wet on these tragedies. So they're destined to keep occurring until you guys make a stink about it. And you do so before the flames are in your backyard. Like I was saying earlier, when I was trying to sell this film, which to me, dude, this thing's a no-brainer. It is the #1 rated firefighter film ever made, documentary or feature, like narrative feature. How could it not sell? Well, because fires weren't burning when we were selling it. It's like one of the slowest fire seasons in California history. So, of course, people don't think about it unless it's right in their face. And it's the same thing with residents. It's the same thing. You guys got to figure out how to wake the fuck up, man. And you got to start pushing for more prescribed fire because this whole, we did 72,000 acres and that was a record. It's not cutting it. You guys need to do what Florida's doing. And spare me with all your excuses. Like every time I talk about how Florida does 2 million acres a year of prescribed fire and California does like 26,000, everyone's like, well, Florida's different. Like, is it? Is it really? Is it really? They went through a firestorm in the 90s and it cost them a ton of money. And so they made a very simple calculation. They asked themselves, with all the structures and the timber industry and, the health issues that arose from this big firestorm of 500,000 acres, well, if they had preemptively burned that 500,000 acres, they wouldn't have any of that, right? So how much did it cost us to have 500,000 acres of wildfire versus how much would it cost us to do 500,000 acres of prescribed fire and prevent all that destruction? Well, as it turns out, they could do about 60 years of 500,000 acres of annual prescribed fire for the same cost of that one conflagration. And so they said, okay, then that's what we're going to do. right? They understood that it's an investment. It's an investment. And it's hard for people to do. It's really hard for people to invest in mitigation because guess what? The end product, the sign of success is the lack of something happening, right? It's very easy for us to see the destruction of the Palisades and recognize the need for something to change. But if you do all this prescribed fire, what is the metric of your success? Nothing. Nothing happens, right? We have a scene in our film where the Silverado fire ran towards Orchard Hills and then just stopped. That to me was the closest I could get to showing people demonstrably like this is what nothing looks like, right? When you do this stuff right, this is the end result, but it's just not sexy enough. It's not in our face enough. And so we don't get it. So whatever it takes for you guys to get it through your heads, man, you gotta do this stuff before it's barking down your backyard. Because guess what? We are in August. These next few weeks are gonna start getting really nasty and it's going to be in your backyard, right? So you're kind of in the luge right now. But take the governor at his own word. When he's telling you that California is a fire-dependent ecosystem, you got to do it, right? You got to do it. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not trying to be a contrarian. I'm not trying to be a partisan, okay? Like I said, I'm giving Gavin Newsom credit. This is his own work product. Governor Newsom put out this document that's extolling the virtues of wildfire and prescribed fire and trying to identify the fact that people need to recognize you cannot get rid of this stuff, right? Cannot get rid of it. It is inevitable. So how's that for me feeding the meter of being nonpartisan? I'm giving the governor credit. Where I don't give him credit is that he's failing to do these numbers. Failing to do these numbers, and they're lying about how much they're doing. So you guys need to hold your politicians accountable for not doing the work that they're telling you needs to get done. Do not let this happen. And if you voted for him, you need to be the ones pressuring him. Don't just like hide in this shadow of like, oh, well, I don't want to criticize. He's on my team. I don't want my team to lose the next election. I don't give a fuck if you have Democrats running the state forever. Just get a Democrat who's competent, who's not going to lie to you about this stuff, who's actually going to do the work. He's already identified it needs to get done. So just stay on these people. Like, let's get a little bit better with this discourse. Like, I see all the people sniping at Spencer because, you know, he's attacking this really bizarre politician, Scott Wiener and Gavin Newsom. And just because they happen to be Democrats, it has to turn into this partisan thing. It's not. It's just these guys are really corrupt, right? So just get the work done, guys. Let's not make this political, but we got to hold politicians accountable because ultimately you're not going to get any of this stuff done unless they get on board. All right. Hopefully that's a good blanket response for all the people who always get in my replies talking about how prescribed fire doesn't work. It's like, fuck you. You guys don't know anything. Please read up. Please make a follow-up post with a link to where we can get that report. I will do that, Casey. I will do that as soon as we are done doing it live. I'm going to post the link to, let me just show what we're looking at one more time. I will post the link to this. This is the California Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force work product from March of 2022. So this was after I finished my film. It's California's strategic plan for expanding the use of beneficial fire. I showed you guys the best snippets, but I will post the link to this when I retweet this live stream. I will post the link to this. I'm also going to post the link to the interagency tracking system, where you can check for yourself the numbers on what they're doing for what they call forest resilience. And you can see the complete absence of work by California state parks being done around the Palisades prior to the Palisades fire. So you can see that I'm not just like, again, I'm not being a partisan and just pulling this out of my ass. I'm telling you, they are not doing the work. They did not do the work to protect the Palisades. They don't care. And the Palisades got wrecked because of it. Because of that, I believe they are responsible. I told you guys there was going to be big news coming out of DC. Unfortunately, they, in their wisdom, have decided to delay that by 2 weeks. color me surprised. I know what the information is. I'm not supposed to tell you guys what the information is. And don't be mad at me, but the reality is it's going to have a big impact on the outcome of the litigation that's ongoing for the Palisades fire victims, who are absolutely entitled to compensation. So the reality is I do not want to create any problems for that litigation. So I'm not going to spill it until the government has released its full report, which I'm told they will do so within 2 weeks. It was supposed to be last week. So it is frustrating, but at the end of the day, our curiosity and our desire to know the official story of what happened has to come behind the outcome of the lawsuit for the true victims of the Palisades fire. That is the most important thing. So let's just try to have patience and recognize the most important thing is that lawsuit is not interfered with. So that way we can maximize the chances for actual accountability. Because as of right now, government is not holding itself accountable. The people who are responsible for this fire and the lack of preparedness, they're still in office. So they're never going to hold themselves accountable, obviously. So the only chance that we have at accountability is this lawsuit. So I'm not going to do anything to undermine that. So I'm told that within 2 weeks, we should have the official report. And it's going to be very, very, very interesting. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I will post the link to this information that we reviewed. Stay safe out there. It's fire season. And in this world of fake AI bullshit, the only way that we can stand out as human beings is by doing it live. So until next time.